Somewhere out at the frozen edge of our solar system, more than 5 billion kilometers from the sun, there's a tiny, icy world with a giant heart on its face. For 76 years, this world was known to every school kid on Earth as the ninth planet. Then, in a single afternoon in the year 2006, a room full of scientists in Prague voted to strip it of that title forever. Today, we are going to tell the complete story of Pluto, from the young man who found it using nothing but 2 photographs and a blinking machine, to the space probe that traveled for 9.5 years just to say hello, to the strange possibility that underneath all that ice, there might actually be an ocean, and maybe even life. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why Pluto lost its planet status, and why many scientists still think that decision was a mistake. Let's get into it. To understand Pluto, we first need to understand our solar system as it was taught for most of the 20th century. Our sun sits at the center and 8 major planets orbit around it. Closest to the sun is Mercury, then Venus, then our own Earth, followed by Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. For a very long time, there was a 9th name on that list, sitting far beyond Neptune in the cold darkness. That name was Pluto. The story of how it was found begins in the year 1930 with a 23-year-old amateur astronomer named Clyde Tombaugh working at the Lowell Observatory in Arizona. Clyde's job was almost unbelievably tedious by today's standards. Every night, he would take photographs of the same patch of sky, then come back a few nights later and photograph the exact same patch again. After that, he would place both photographic plates into a machine called a blink comparator, which rapidly switched between the 2 images. If a star stayed in exactly the same spot in both photos, it was just a distant star, far too far away to appear to move. But if something shifted position between the 2 shots, that object was much closer to us, meaning it could be a planet, a comet, or an asteroid. Astronomers before Tombaugh had already predicted a 9th planet, sometimes called Planet X, might exist beyond Neptune because of tiny irregularities they thought they saw in the orbits of Uranus and Neptune. Tombaugh's job was to find it. On February 18, 1930, after months of grinding through thousands of star images, Clyde Tombaugh finally noticed a faint point of light that had shifted its position between 2 photographic plates. It was sitting well beyond the orbit of Neptune. His discovery was checked and rechecked by his colleagues, and on March 13, 1930, the world was told that a new planet had been found at the edge of the solar system. If you think discovering a planet at 23 years old with almost no formal astronomy training is impressive, you are not alone, and honestly, that alone deserves a like on this video before we go any further. The next challenge was naming this newly discovered world, and the story behind its name is one of the most charming in astronomy. An 11-year-old English schoolgirl named Venetia Burney was the one who suggested it. Her grandfather had told her about the discovery of a new, distant, dark planet over breakfast, and she immediately suggested the name Pluto, after the Roman god of the underworld. It made perfect sense because the new planet sat in a region so far from the sun that it existed in near-permanent darkness and freezing cold, much like the mythological underworld itself. The name was submitted, the observatory loved it, and Pluto officially became the 9th planet of our solar system. For the next 76 years, Pluto held its place proudly on that list, taught in every textbook, memorized by every student using tricks like, "My very educated mother just served us nachos." Then everything changed in August of 2006, when the International Astronomical Union, or IAU, held a major conference in Prague. Thousands of astronomers from around the world gathered there, and by the end of that meeting, a vote had been taken that would rewrite science textbooks everywhere. Pluto was officially reclassified as a dwarf planet, and it was removed from the list of the solar system's major planets. So why did this happen? To answer that, we need to look at the actual definition the IAU created for what counts as a planet. According to their new rules, an object must satisfy 3 separate conditions. First, it must orbit the sun. Second, it must have enough mass and gravity to pull itself into a roughly round spherical shape. Third, and this is the crucial one, it must have cleared its orbital neighborhood of other debris, meaning it should be the dominant gravitational object in its orbital path. Pluto easily passes the first 2 tests. It orbits the sun, and it is round, but it completely fails the 3rd test because Pluto sits inside a region called the Kuiper Belt, a vast ring of icy bodies beyond Neptune that contains thousands of other objects of significant size. Since Pluto has not cleared its orbital path of these neighbors, the IAU decided it could not be classified as a full planet, and instead created the new category of dwarf planet, specifically to describe worlds like it. This decision was, and still is, incredibly controversial. Many astronomers, including some very senior and respected ones, publicly disagreed with the vote and argued that the definition itself was flawed and rushed. Even today, there are scientists actively campaigning to have Pluto's planetary status restored, arguing that the clearing the neighborhood rule is arbitrary and would actually disqualify some other accepted planets too, if applied strictly. So, if you have ever felt personally offended by Pluto's demotion, you are in good scientific company, and honestly, that kind of controversy is exactly why this video deserves a like right now. There is actually one more piece of this demotion story that most people never hear about, and it is arguably the real reason the whole debate started in the first place. In 2005, a team of astronomers led by Mike Brown discovered another icy object out in the far reaches of the solar system, one initially measured to be even larger than Pluto. This object was eventually named Eris. Suddenly, astronomers faced an uncomfortable question. If Pluto counted as a planet, then Eris would have to count too, and so might several other large Kuiper Belt objects, meaning the planet count could keep growing indefinitely as more distant icy worlds were discovered. Rather than let the official list spiral out of control, the IAU decided it needed a firm, testable definition, and that very definition is what ended up disqualifying both Pluto and Eris, sorting them into the newly created dwarf planet category instead. In a strange twist of fate, the discovery that could have given us a 10th planet is the reason we ended up with only 8. Now, let's talk about just how strange and fascinating Pluto actually is, because even without its planet title, this little world is genuinely one of the weirdest places in our entire solar system. The first mind-bending fact is its size. Pluto is so small that it is actually smaller than our own moon. Pluto's diameter is roughly 2,377 kilometers, while our moon's diameter is about 3,475 kilometers. That means the object we spent 76 years calling the 9th planet of our solar system is smaller than a satellite, orbiting our own Earth. If you lined up about 6 Plutos side by side, they still would not match the width of planet Earth. Sit with that for a second, because it genuinely reshapes how you think about the scale of our solar system, and if that surprised you even a little, this is a perfect moment to hit that like button and subscribe before we continue. The second incredible fact is that Pluto has a heart on its surface, and this is not a metaphor. In July of 2015, NASA's New Horizons spacecraft flew past Pluto and beamed back the first ever high-resolution images of its surface, and scientists were stunned to see a massive, unmistakably heart-shaped region staring back at them. This area is officially named Tombaugh Regio, in honor of Clyde Tombaugh, the man who discovered Pluto nearly a century earlier. This heart-shaped region is made largely of nitrogen ice, and it is so enormous that it could comfortably fit 2 entire regions the size of the American state of Texas inside it. Third, Pluto's orbit is bizarre compared to every other planet in our solar system. Most planets orbit the Sun in a nearly flat, almost circular path, all roughly aligned with each other. Pluto's orbit, on the other hand, is highly elongated and tilted at a steep angle compared to the rest of the solar system. This unusual orbit is so extreme that, for a period of time, Pluto actually moves closer to the Sun than Neptune does, temporarily becoming the 8th closest object to the Sun instead of the 9th. This last happened between 1979 and 1999, a full 20-year stretch during which Neptune, not Pluto, was technically the farthest planet from the Sun. Fourth, Pluto is not alone out there. It has 5 known moons. The largest by far is Charon, and Charon is so massive relative to Pluto that some scientists argue the two should be thought of as a double dwarf planet system, rather than a simple planet and moon relationship, because Charon is roughly half the diameter of Pluto itself. The other 4 moons are much smaller and are named Nix, Hydra, Kerberos, and Styx, all discovered after 2005 using the Hubble Space Telescope. Fifth, Pluto has actual mountains made of ice, but not the kind of ice you are picturing. These are not frozen water mountains like you would find on Earth. New Horizons discovered mountain ranges on Pluto that rise more than 3 kilometers high, and they are built from water ice that has become as hard as solid rock in Pluto's brutally cold environment. Between these frozen mountain ranges, scientists also spotted flowing glaciers, except these glaciers are not made of frozen water either. They are made of nitrogen ice, slowly flowing across Pluto's surface almost exactly the way glaciers flow here on Earth. Sixth, and this one genuinely shocked scientists, Pluto has an atmosphere. Despite being unbelievably small and unbelievably far from the Sun, Pluto holds onto a thin atmosphere made mostly of nitrogen, with small traces of methane and carbon monoxide. What makes this atmosphere truly strange is that it is not permanent. When Pluto swings closer to the Sun during its orbit, some of the frozen nitrogen on its surface warms up just enough to turn into gas, thickening its atmosphere. Then, as Pluto moves farther away from the Sun again, that same gas cools back down and falls to the surface as fresh ice. In a very real sense, Pluto appears to breathe in and out over the course of its 248-year orbit around the Sun. That single fact alone is one of the most beautifully strange things in all of astronomy, and if it gave you chills, do not scroll past without liking this video. Seventh, Pluto's surface color is not what most people expect. Many assume that because Pluto is covered in ice, it must be white or gray, similar to how we imagine snow and glaciers on Earth. In reality, large parts of Pluto's surface are a reddish-brown color. This coloring comes from complex organic compounds called tholins. When ultraviolet light from the distant sun strikes methane molecules in Pluto's thin atmosphere, it triggers a chemical reaction that creates these tholins, which then settle down onto the surface and coat it in that distinctive, rusty, reddish-brown hue. Now let's get to the question everyone actually wants answered. Could there be life on Pluto? The honest answer is complicated. If we are talking about life as we typically imagine it here on Earth, meaning animals, plants, or anything walking around on the surface, the answer is a clear and definite no. Pluto's average surface temperature drops to around minus 230 degrees Celsius, a temperature so extreme that no known living organism could possibly survive there. There is no liquid water visible on its surface, and its atmosphere is far too thin for any creature to breathe. However, there is one genuinely exciting possibility that has scientists intrigued. Several research studies suggest that beneath Pluto's icy crust, there might be a hidden subsurface ocean of liquid water. At first, this sounds almost impossible. How could liquid water exist beneath the surface of one of the coldest known worlds in our solar system? But the explanation actually makes scientific sense. Pluto's core is rocky, and that rocky core likely contains radioactive elements that slowly decay over billions of years, releasing heat as they do. This internal heat could be enough to melt the ice directly above the core into liquid water, creating an insulated ocean trapped beneath Pluto's frozen shell. And if liquid water truly exists down there, then theoretically, simple microbial life could potentially survive in that environment. We already know that similar conditions exist here on Earth, deep on the ocean floor near hydrothermal vents where sunlight never reaches. Yet entire ecosystems of bacteria and other organisms thrive using chemical energy instead of sunlight. If Pluto has similar conditions hidden beneath its surface, it is not unreasonable to imagine that some very basic form of life could exist there too. This is still just a theory, though, and confirming it would require sending an entirely new mission specifically designed to study what lies beneath Pluto's icy shell, something that remains far beyond our current technology and budget. Still, just imagine that. A hidden ocean, sealed away under miles of ice, on a world so far from the sun, it takes light over 5 hours just to reach it. If that thought does not send a shiver down your spine, I don't know what will, and that alone is worth a like and a subscribe. Let's talk now about the mission that made all of this discovery possible. NASA's New Horizons spacecraft, one of the most genuinely exciting missions in the entire history of space exploration. New Horizons launched in January of 2006, and it took an incredible 9.5 years just to reach Pluto. When it launched, Pluto was still officially classified as a planet. By the time the spacecraft actually arrived there, Pluto had already been demoted to a dwarf planet, which is a strange little historical detail all on its own. New Horizons launched at the fastest speed of any spacecraft ever sent from Earth, traveling at roughly 58,000 kilometers per hour, which is faster than a speeding bullet, and it still needed nearly a decade to arrive. That fact alone should give you some sense of just how mind-bogglingly far away Pluto actually is from us. In July of 2015, New Horizons finally made its closest approach to Pluto, passing within about 12,500 kilometers of its surface and capturing thousands of detailed images along with enormous amounts of scientific data. When those images reached Earth, they stunned the entire scientific community because nobody had expected Pluto to be this complex or this beautiful. The heart-shaped region became visible for the first time, along with the towering ice mountains, the slow-flowing nitrogen glaciers, and details that no one had ever imagined finding on such a small, distant world. Perhaps the most surprising discovery of all was that Pluto is geologically active. This means that Pluto's surface is still changing right now, in real time, rather than being a frozen, dead world locked in place for billions of years. That heart-shaped region known as Sputnik Planitia, made largely of nitrogen ice, appears to be constantly and slowly shifting, almost like an extremely slow-moving glacier. Scientists also believe there may be cryovolcanoes on Pluto, which are volcanoes that erupt ice and water instead of molten rock and lava. All of this evidence points to one clear conclusion. Pluto is not some dead, frozen leftover from the early solar system. It is an active, evolving world, and we are only just beginning to understand it. It is also worth remembering that New Horizons only performed a flyby of Pluto, meaning it zoomed past at high speed rather than slowing down to enter orbit around it. This was simply a matter of physics and fuel. Pluto is so distant, and the spacecraft was moving so fast that it would have required an enormous amount of additional fuel to slow down and enter orbit, far more than the spacecraft was ever designed to carry. So instead, New Horizons gathered as much data as it possibly could during its brief flyby window and then continued on its journey, now traveling even deeper into the Kuiper Belt, sending back new discoveries about other icy objects out at the very edge of our solar system. So why does any of this actually matter? Why should we care so much about a tiny, distant, icy world that got voted off the list of official planets? The truth is, Pluto teaches us something much bigger than its own story. It reminds us that our solar system is far more diverse and unpredictable than we ever imagined, and that every single world out there, no matter how small, has its own unique character and its own secrets. Pluto also teaches us that science is never truly finished. What we accept as fact today can change tomorrow as we gather new evidence and refine our understanding. Pluto's planetary status could theoretically be restored someday if scientists ever decide to revise the current definition of what counts as a planet. And finally, the story of Pluto's discovery itself carries a beautiful lesson. A 23-year-old with no formal astronomy degree found it through pure persistence, and an 11-year-old girl gave it its name. Curiosity and dedication clearly do not require age or credentials. They just require the willingness to look up and keep looking. It is also worth mentioning just how much Pluto still matters in popular culture, even decades after its discovery and years after its demotion. Schools around the world still debate whether Pluto should be a planet, and that single debate alone has turned millions of children into curious young astronomers. Very few celestial objects manage to spark this much genuine public passion and argument, and that alone says something about how special this tiny world really is. Some space agencies have even discussed early concept missions for a Pluto orbiter, something that would linger around the dwarf planet for months instead of just flying past it in a matter of hours, which could one day answer many of the questions New Horizons simply did not have time to explore. So will we ever actually visit Pluto in person? With our current technology, that remains extremely difficult. It took 9.5 years just to send an unmanned spacecraft there using the fastest launch speed ever achieved. And sending actual human beings to a world that distant is essentially impossible with today's engineering and life support capabilities. But science and technology continue to advance at a rapid pace. And it is entirely possible that within the next 50 to 100 years, humanity will develop the kind of propulsion and spacecraft technology needed to make a return trip to Pluto, perhaps even one day standing on that icy reddish-brown surface and looking directly at that giant heart-shaped plane with our own eyes. And that is the complete story of Pluto, a tiny distant world sitting so far from our sun that a single day there stretches across roughly 6 of our Earth days. A place with mountains made of frozen water as hard as stone and glaciers made of flowing nitrogen ice. A world with its own heart-shaped region, gazing outward toward its largest moon, and quite possibly hiding a secret ocean beneath its frozen crust, an ocean that might, just might, be capable of hosting the simplest forms of life somewhere far beneath the surface. Pluto reminds us that there is still an enormous amount left to discover in our universe, and honestly, that might be the most exciting thing about science itself, the fact that no matter how much we already know, there will always be so much more waiting to be found. If this video blew your mind even a little, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel right now, because we have so many more incredible space mysteries coming your way very soon, and you will not want to miss a single one.